Dustin.
James, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. So I don't think I've had you as a judge before. Do you mind just articulating a little about your background?
So I did policy debate for probably a solid 12, 13 years in my life. Took a little time off after coaching at an NDTC to get my PhD. I'm back at it now, so I don't know a ton of, I know a fair amount about the practice of LD. I don't really give a shit about the norms. I don't care about norms in my own life. So you do you, have offense.
For topicality, do you sway towards proven abuse versus potential abuse, or are you pretty open to either?
I'm pretty agnostic about most specific issues. I prefer small topics. That's one that I think debates about predictable research. But I'm also well open to.
Okay, no, that's good. Alright, I will put it in the Dropbox. Is it open? Alright, everyone ready? First, inherency A, no information sharing because of intelligence pushback, May 2018. The U.S. government and private industry have been struck by an impasse over the decade. The U.S. intelligence community argues the greater declassification and sharing of information with private companies could put technical sources at risk. Thus, the plan: the president will order the creation of a classified communication channel for Cyber Command to coordinate with private companies to protect critical infrastructure and prevent complex catastrophe. We reserve the right to clarify. Solvency A. Companies should go to Cyber Command to hack back on their behalf, Duffy 2018. The three individuals with experience in the private sector, intelligence community, and military concurred that if companies feel compelled to hack back, they should delegate any potential response to the government if retaliation is warranted. U.S. Cyber Command should carry it out, said Weapon Chief Strategy Officer at NISOS Group. No company has the intelligence, offensive tools, and contextual understanding of the U.S. government. Bullet. The former Chief of Operations of the CIA's Information Operations Center attacks on the critical U.S. critical infrastructure would warrant a response. Cybercom is the agency that has best resources to respond to these threats. By allowing companies to hack back U.S. lawmakers would be enabling a kind of cyber vigilantism. That behavior would become profound and potentially dangerous consequences. Companies venturing out into foreign networks would run the risk of disrupting existing U.S. intelligence or military operations. And B, without an information sharing network, Cyber Command cannot coordinate with private companies to hack back, May 2018. There is no way the U.S. and critical infrastructure companies to carry out real-time coordination that would be necessary for private company to work with Cyber Command. These companies will need to have access to classified communications channels and sufficient personnel. And C, the U.S. has run similar networks effectively and the benefits outweigh the risks, May 2018. The potential benefits to national security outweigh the risks. Critical infrastructure companies cannot be expected to protect themselves. The U.S. government has experience running successful classified information sharing networks such as the one for the defense industrial base. Advantage 1 is the internet. A, lack of cybersecurity strategy is causing the U.S. to lose the effort to maintain an open internet, Gallup 2018. The U.S. is losing ground as the internet standard bearer. Beijing and Brussels are effectively writing the rules that may determine the future of the internet. Experts in policy say the trends could slow the internet's growth, not innovation. While the result of the shift is the erosion of the freewheeling U.S. vision of the internet had reigned for decades. The U.S. model looks somewhat feckless, said Director of the Council of Foreign Relations Cyber Policy Program. The lack of U.S. leadership also harms ordinary Americans by letting the industry block the adoption of strong protections against cyber attacks. The U.S. has taken a much more modest approach to its own cybersecurity policy. The U.S. has advanced no coherent vision of cybersecurity regulation page or said if the U.S. line is leave the status quo as it is, that's always hard. And B, the Chinese model threatens the internet, Sachs 2018. China's model appeals to the countries because it provides them with tools to take control of the open internet. China's model may also not even be effective in delivering on its promises. For example, government-imposed content control measures have proven to be poor tools in fighting online extremism. China's control-driven model defies international openness, interoperability, and collaboration, the foundation of global internet governance, and ultimately of the internet itself. And C, free internet solves extinction, Eagleman 2010. Many great civilizations have fallen, natural disasters, resource depletion, economic meltdown, disease, poor information flow, corruption, we command technology no one else has possessing rapid communication network. The internet can be our key to survival because of the ability to work telepresently and inhibit microbial transmission. The internet will predict natural disasters. News stories are increasingly becoming user-generated nets of up-to-the-minute information. Discoveries are retained and shared. New discoveries catch on immediately. Censorship of ideas was a familiar specter in the last century. In many cases, it directly contributed to the collapse of the nation. The internet democratizes the flow of information. Human capital is vastly increased. Crowdsourcing brings people together to solve problems. Advantage 2 is mishelp. A, the lack of government hackback is causing an explosion in private offensive cyber firms, Schmiddle 2018. By some estimates, 90% of American companies have been hacked, but private companies are large enough to defend themselves on their own. The private sector is increasingly calling on the cybersecurity industry. Many cybersecurity firms offer what is called active defense. It is an intentionally ill-defined term for others. It is coy shorthand for hacking back. Braverman told me that the most major cybersecurity companies dance at the limits of computer trespassing every day of the week. And B, companies are selling offensive hackback tools now, Schmiddle 2018. Cybersecurity companies are preparing to capitalize on the more permissive legal environment. The CEO of Sumitra has began to sell an illegal hackback add-on. Maze Runner could Maze Runner be used by the U.S. companies to sabotage the attacker's computer? That would be illegal. Everyone replies, it's up to the client to decide how to use them. And C, this leads to multiple scenarios for conflict escalation, Carroll 2017. Extending the private sector's ability to carry out active defense may produce instability. Private actor based in country executes disruptive active defense action. The government of country C retaliates against both the defender and the government of country A. Private actor based in country A executes exploitive active defense against activities against the machine in country B. The machine in country B misinterprets the defender's move as a prelude to attack the government of countries A and B are engaged in international exchange of cyber blows that both sides seek to de-escalate and terminate. Armed private technology firms recruited into the conflict by the two countries misinterpret or choose to ignore the government's instructions. The cycle repeats. And D, this will lead to shooting wars, NAIC 2018. Private companies hacking back scares many people into the cybersecurity policy community. Could have companies starting wars that the U.S. military will have to finish. And E, the U.S. can attribute attacks, but the private sector can't. War 2018. While some countries are getting better at attribution, these countries will remain asymmetric. Capabilities remain out of reach for all but a handful of the most powerful states unless they receive assistance from one of the more advanced powers. And F, we need to control the number of private hacks, Derugian 2018. Regardless of legislation, certain levels of hack will still occur, but these small-scale hacker heroes cannot compare to the potential fallback of hackbacks posed by tech giants. And G, militarized private companies are the new dangerous power structure, Loader and Walker 07. Civilized security is faced not only with the task of controlling state power, it is confronted more with the notable absence of political institutions with the capacity to prevent those with the largest pockets from organizing their own security in ways that impose unjustifiable burdens of insecurity upon others. The main obstacle to social justice is not the invasive intentions of the state, but its growing impotence. Open for questions.
Okay, so which critical infrastructure sector are you partnering with?
So 85% of U.S. critical infrastructure is owned by private entities, and so we
and
would
there
be,
are 16 different.
right. So I would argue that I wouldn't be affecting all of them. Any private or company that owns U.S. critical infrastructure would be helped by the plan.
So the United States Department of Defense, which currently only partners with the defense industrial base, is going to now partner with every single
It's
company.
U.S. Cybercom, and what we're doing is we're creating an information sharing communication channel so that Cyber Command can hack back on behalf of the private companies that get hacked by foreign entities.
Okay, so how is this different from existing threat sharing models?
Right, so we don't have one right now to share with the private sector. U.S. Cyber
There are
Command does.
tons of cybercom and DHS programs to share threat information.
not with the private sector. Like
Yes,
my
with the
solvency
private
card, my third solvency card talks about how the Department of Defense has one for the industrial base. What we're talking about specifically is for hacking back to protect the private critical infrastructure.
So what is the difference between sharing threat information and coordinating like hackings? What is the difference here?
Right, so like right now we don't have an info sharing system that coordinates hackbacks. So my plan does that.
Okay. How does your plan handle getting security clearances to every company that handles U.S. critical infrastructure?
Right. So what like my solvency card says that we have like done this before with like the Department of Defense, and so basically like it would be
Which
an
card
open.
says that?
That's my third solvency card.
The NATE 18?
Yeah, the one that says that we've done it before. That
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
government has
So-
experience running successful or classified information
Right, so it would
sharing
just be
networks.
done the same way that these networks are done, like they have run these type of info sharing networks before. We're just going to have a specific network that is for private companies to protect their critical infrastructure between these private companies and US Cybercom.
Alright. Let's talk about miscalculation.
Yeah.
So your interpretation of miscalculation is that companies decide to hack back.
Right, yeah, my C card is really good about this. I read 3 examples of miscalculation coming out of that card that talks about how, like, when companies are going to hack back, they can't do attribution, so they don't necessarily know who
So
they're
where's
hacking
the
back.
evidence that says companies aren't hacking back now?
Companies are hacking back now.
Yeah, and so where's the proof?
Right, so like what I'm saying is like private securitization is bad, and so
Yeah, but
private
I'm saying,
sector
where's the
doing
break
this
the
is bad.
If companies have been hacking back for years now, where is the
I
impact?
mean, I would argue it's not happening back. It's not happening. Has not been happening for years. But what I'm saying is like we have to stop it now in order to prevent miscalculation.
Okay. No problem. Let me upload this. So the order is going to be 2 off in this case.
What order is the case in? Just like
We'll do solvency, advantage 1, and advantage 2. Pretty much same thing. First off, case position to substantial interpretation, the substantial increase concerning the essential action of cybercrime, Oxford English Dictionary 18, substantial concerning the essential something, increase refers to amount of size, Cambridge Dictionary 18, increase to make something become larger amount of size, these violations of plan does not increase the amount of essential actions by cybercrime. This comes from the DoD's latest summary of cyber strategy, 9/18/18. The department must take action in cyberspace, will conduct cyberspace operations, collect intelligence, prepare military capabilities, we will defend and forward to disrupt or halt malicious cyber activity at its source, we will strengthen the security and resilience of networks and systems, and we will collaborate with our interagency, industry, and international partners to advance our mutual interests. Here, the standards versus ground. The only way to guard unique office, the app expands the essential actions of cybercrime. Simply doing more of the same approach, which information sharing is something cybercrime already does, is not a substantial increase. Second is fairness and status quo is the core of negative ground. If the app is not required to defend a change, then there's simply nothing left to debate. Dear the voters, first, D is voted for fairness and education. Second, being interpretation is the only way to fairly adjudicate. If I win that the app is abused, then they are by definition unreasonable. Next, go to the security thing. First, The 1AC is an overt attempt to leverage existential threats in favor of hasty political action. This is textbook securitization. Hansen and Nissenbaum now. The general concept of security applies in mechanism of authority to construction of threats and the adoption of emergency measures. Security is particular discourse of political forces concept that does something rather than objective condition. The criteria of securitization is the establishment of an existential threat with a sound sufficient to have substantial political effect. Security frames the issue either as a special kind of politics or as above politics, in which case an issue is dealt with at an accelerated pace in ways that may violate normal rules. Security discourse may bring in other sections of the military. This discourse of articulation of urgency and extreme measures thus central to the boundary between security proper concepts that bear only some resemblance to security. The arguments of the word security is not essential for years. Securitization might consist of only a metaphorical security reference. Second, the absolute conflation of the possible versus the probable and its allusions to never-before-seen cascading failures is moreover an act of hyper-securitization. Hansen and Nissenbaum 9. Hyper-securitization has been introduced to describe an expansion of securitization the abnormal level of threats. We identified the striking manner in which cybersecurity discourse interested in a multi-dimensional cyber disaster scenarios that pack a long list of severe threats and a monomanual cascading sequence, and the fact that neither of these scenarios has so far taken place. What distinguishes hyper-securitization is that their instantaneous and interlocking effects have a damage network that causes societal, financial, and military breakdown, bringing in all other sectors. Cyber-securitization has no history found in evidence, but try to conjure historical analysis with electronic Pearl Harbors. The combination of cascading disaster and the absence of prior incident that acting creates a crucial ambiguity within cybersecurity discourse, the difficulty of saying that it cannot have and creates a powerful space for the projection of the impossible. Onto the impacts. First, securitization condemns itself into perpetual policy failure from Dillon and Reed 2000. Governmentality presses the question of order in terms of the management of population. The management of population is further retired in terms of security. Policy domains reify the problem stages of life by turning these increasingly political and contestable orderings into problems that require continuous attention of policymakers. Governmentality literally creates market for policy science. Paralysis of analysis is what policymakers seek to avoid. They do not have the control they want, yet zero policy failure can help them in the continuous search for the new analysis that will extract from zero policy failures no simple shortcoming that policy science will ultimately overcome. Zero policy failure is rooted in the ontological and epistemological assumptions that fashion the ways in which the global government problematize society is in the process of emergence. Governance promotes the very changes and unintended outcomes that it then serially re-problematizes in terms of policy failure. And second, securitization perpetuates instability by rushing unchecked policy with unintended consequences. Raymond 16. Over-securitization carries real costs in terms of dimension, openness, and interoperability, and also regards stability, risk of framing issues concerning securities and recognizing diverse areas of higher scholarship. Securitization makes extraordinary steps possible and diminishes opportunities for dissent or even policy review. It also contributes to a sense of urgency that may prompt rapid policy adoption that is inappropriate given the level of uncertainty and interactions between technology and particular rule sets. Next is the alternative. The alternative is to reject the hyper-securitization rhetoric of the affirmative and to embrace an interdisciplinary approach to cybersecurity. Hansen and Nissenbaum 9. The most significant lesson may be to bring the political and normative implications of speaking security to the foreground. Cybersecurity is particularly powerful because they involve a double move out of the political realm, the politicized speaking securitized, and the political to detect by and takes an interdisciplinary effort to counter it. Our ambition is to create a space for interdisciplinary discussion. Cybersecurity stands at the intersection of multiple disciplines, and it is important that both analysis and academic communications brought to bear on it. The technical underpinnings of cybersecurity require that higher scholars acquire familiarity with technical methods to the limits, and that computer science become more conscious of the politicized field in which they decide how their decisions might impact security, access, trust, and privacy. Second, rejecting security logic is a prerequisite to any real political change. Neocleus and 8. The only way out is to share the logic of security altogether, directed as so ideologically low in favor of the state that any real political thought should be pressed to give it up. Security has become so all-encompassing that it marginalizes the basic discussion that animate political life. The constant prioritizing of mythical security as a political end constitutes rejecting politics in any meaningful sense of the term. Security politics is anti-politics, dominating political discourse in much the same manner as security state tries to dominate human beings. The real test is not to build disposable with yet another vision of security, but to fight for an alternative political language to keep demanding more security as a blind response to the possibility of building real alternatives out there for entities in contemporary politics. We need a way of thinking and talking about such bleeding of politics that moves beyond security. It requires recognizing that security is an illusion that is forgotten. It is illusion. It requires accepting insecurity as part of the human condition and instead learning to tolerate the uncertainties, ambiguities, and insecurities that come with being human. Now let's talk about the case. First, I've already articulated and established that cybercom is already establishing interagency dialogue with the private sector. Cybercom and the DHS specifically ultimately have multiple information sharing avenues. Second, when you look at solvency, the fundamental assumption of this app is that the United States will be better at avoiding miscalc than private companies. This is simply false. Cyber offense is often an influent choice, alerting enemies to their own vulnerabilities and risking significant collateral damages. From Raymond in 15. Sometimes the more destructive the cyber weapon, the less effective it is. Some of the best cyber weapons are subtle, intended to achieve effects without adversaries even realizing they've been hacked. Such that would lie dormant for 2 weeks, recording operations data from the centuries. In this case, a self-prolonged attack is much more effective than the quick and obvious cyber attack. Yeah, you can have the card there. The second turn, systematically hacking back, escalates tit-for-tat gamesmanship and eliminates the possibility for decisive victory. This is the card. Berkeley Calvert 16. The vast majority of cyber attacks have been low complexity, lacking precise targeting, and mainly integrated non-critical services. The defense industry and establishments seek to establish a broad militarized ability to hack back in the initial aggressor. The paradigm is that hacking back is an opportunity. The first question from a strategic standpoint is hacking back warranted? As long as cyber attacks are unsystematic and of moderate complexity, these attacks pose marginal risk for the targeted nation. An alternative approach is that the targeted nation decides not to intervene basis hackback and instead utilizes the information delivered by an initial attacker to the targeted nation's advantage. This model of restrained red bleed represents the targeted nation that refuses to play the evolutionary tit-for-tat game, but instead silently passes and collects information for the cyber attacks, and in doing so, changes from prey to predator, unilaterally not striking back, can strategically create decisive capability instead of engaging in a never-ending tit-for-tat set of digital interchange with the attacker with no decisive end in sight. Right there. Ultimately, both the miscalc scenario and the internet scenario are just another justification for the United States to become more militarized and more involved with private sector security. All of their arguments that talk about how we need to avoid all of this miscalculation are a direct attempt to control and the direct attempt for the government to retain control over the private sector and the internet specifically, which ultimately is worse off for the United States and still increases the risk of miscalculation. Thank you.
Okay. I'm T. So what, where in this card does it say, on your violation that right now US Cybercom is, giving, classified information to the private sector?
Cybercom is already giving classified information.
Right,
to the
but
private
like
sector.
where does your violation card say that?
This violation card.
It just says that you will you're collaborating with interagency.
Yeah, if you know anything about the topic, you know that Cybercom has multiple information sharing outlets that they already can do give threat information to the private sector and the defense industry.
Right, but like
there is already.
Where does your evidence say that though? Like right now in the status quo, they are not sharing information on hacking back with private companies. Where is your card that says that?
Yes, they are.
Well,
This evidence. I think
Okay.
you're misunderstanding the T.
Alright, let's go to the K. What's the status?
Unconditional.
Unconditional? Okay. What exactly does the alt do?
Yeah, so first the alternative is to reject the hypersecuritization rhetoric of the affirmative. Both the Hansen and Nussbaum and the Alexis card talk about the only way to move past this is to reject security rhetoric. The second talks about how we need to actually embrace an interdisciplinary approach.
So what happens after you embrace the alternative? Like what happens? Like well, how do you solve for the 1AC?
We begin to move past this unnecessary threat construction. We begin to realize that insecurity
So how do you
is
solve
an inherent
that
part.
for the private sector?
I'm saying your threat constructions are an illusion. Okay? We have had
so my
private
question
sector
is,
has
how
been
do
able to hack back
Right,
for
cool.
years.
So my question is, how do you solve back for the private sector hacking back right now? How do you solve for that?
I don't need to solve that specifically. The private sector can hack back all at once. What I'm saying is problematic is that constructing that as a threat and saying that this is going to cause miscalculation, nuclear war, and therefore that the United States has to start deliberately sharing information and taking over the internet is problematic. And this type of discourse and this type of rhetoric is increasingly problematic.
So then let's go to your turn. So you say that hacking back actually escalates things. So how does that not interact with your K when you're saying that the private sector can hack back as much as they want?
I'm saying that Cybercom is going to be no more effective at hacking back.
So the private sector will still hack back, and your turn says that hacking back escalates. So how does that not turn your criticism?
So the app doesn't solve no matter what. That's what the turn card says. The security K functions on a different level where it says these threat constructions are bad.
Okay, that's cool. I'm gonna take some prep. Starting now. Okay, ending with 2:15 left. Flashing it over. Order is going to be T, inherency, solvency, the advantages, the K. Alright? Cool. First, on topicality, first we need his interpretation and cross-text. He asked me what I'm affecting. I said 85% of U.S. critical infrastructure is privately owned, and I'm affecting all of the different sectors of critical infrastructure, which means I am substantial to is the counter interpretation. Substantially means to a greater significant extent, according to Oxford Dictionary Online Access 2016. We meet prioritizing hackback will significantly increase cyber command actions as proven by our 1AC evidence for the standards. Neg ground, they get access to all negative arguments about increasing cybercrime actions. Hacking is bad, government securitization bad, etc. B, our affirmative is huge and a major discussion in the literature. We shouldn't exclude it. C, solvency advocates are in short supply. They check tiny affirmatives. And D, numerical definitions are arbitrary and self-serving. And 5, good is good enough. We have a reasonable interpretation of the topic. Searching for a perfect interpretation detracts from the examination of the issues of cybercrime. Instead, we have endless topicality debates, and this is bad for education. On to inherency. He says that they're already doing the plan, but this is not true. The U.S. is not taking action on cyber. This is Lynch 8/21/18. There's a common frustration the Senate was not done more to protect America from cyber attacks during the hearings. For too long, the Senate has done nothing despite good intentions, but people have been afraid of pissing off different interests and no new legislation. This is per 2018. Whether Republican manages to cling to a majority in the House or Democrats sweep them out of Congress, power struggles and divisions within both parties with polarizing effect of Trump's are a recipe for a chaotic period ahead with little legislation making its way out of the Capitol right now. In the status quo, we do not have an information sharing system for hacking back on behalf of the private sector. So I am in here. Let's go to solvency. He said that that it's already happening, but this is not true. You can extend across those cards. He says term that cyber offense is not good, but what my 1AC is saying is that having the government do it is better than having the private sector do it. My whole entire 1AC is indicative of reasons of why the private sector doing it is bad, and you should prefer the government doing it. Additionally, he says turn the hacking back equals escalation, but what I'm saying is there's already hackback now. The private companies are doing it, and all of the cards that go conceded in my 1AC are saying that we need to have the government do it. So let's go to my advantage. One, you can go ahead and extend across that. I'm saying that free internet solves back for extinction. This goes completely conceded. We need to have a strategy for cybercom in order to keep the open internet. That goes conceded. And on advantage two, you can go ahead and extend across my A card that says there's an increase of private cyber firms now, which means hacking back is currently happening, which means that proves that he will that this is happening right now. And you can extend across my C card and my D card saying that the private sector doing it is way worse than the government doing because they're bad at it. They don't know who they're hacking back. They're hacking back. They can start a war that the U.S. military will have to finish. The U.S. military has the best capabilities to do it. That's my E card. And additionally, you can extend across my G card that says that militarizing private companies is a dangerous power structure. This directly answers back the K. So let's go there. First, on the K. He says that this is an attempt of securitization, but the case turns the K because the private securitization is worse. He concedes all of these cards coming out of the 1AC, which means that it turns the case. Additionally, he double turns himself by saying that the private companies can go ahead and hack back as much as they want, but he puts a turn on case saying that hacking back causes escalation. This means that the K will never actually solve because you'll always have the impact of escalation unless you let the government do it, which means that there's no offense on the K. Onto the alternative, perm do the plan and non-mutually exclusive parts of the alternative. All their no permutation arguments are just solvency attacks which are outweighed by our net benefits, and 2, double bind. If the alternative is so weak that when it's combined with the plan and a permutation it fails, it will never be able to overcome all of the securitization in the status quo. Is the alternative strong enough to overcome all of the securitization that it can be combined with the plan? And 3, all of our evidence is comparative. Private security is worse than government cybersecurity, creating a vacuum allows corporations to yield their own private cyber armies, which increases conflicts and rights violations. In turn, the alternative does nothing and locks civilians out of discussion. This is Diver 2013. And it's easy to dismiss the security as a myth to be demolished, but the vulnerabilities of cyberspace are very real. The underbelly of cybercrime is undeniably huge, and arms race in cyberspace is escalating. Dismissing these vulnerabilities are manufactured myths will only marginalize civic networks and the conversations where policies are to be forged. He says that these threats are not real, but all my 1AC evidence says that private companies are getting hacked back now, and that's why they are in search of these offensive tools, which is shows that these hackbacks are currently happening, even if they are an existential risk. I'm not saying that these hackbacks are the risk. I'm saying that miscalculation is the risk when you let private sectors do it. In turn, cyber threats are real. The permutation is the best way to address them and check excesses of security. This is Diver 2013. These forces appear to be driving securitization processes in cyberspace. It's imperative that we use our agency to check and constrain the least desirable elements of these trends. The securitization of cyberspace may be inevitable, but what form that security takes is not and can't solve other nations. This is PIC in 2012, and the issue will not be to securitize in the short term. Many states are in the process of making their own defensive and offensive purposes. For now, securitization is a necessary evil. In turn, can't desecuritize because all politics are grounded in violence. Hello 2018. The concept is much like that of securitization, which holds that security forms the exception to politics. From this perspective, a reverse process can take place to the securitization or demilitarization. What militarization holds out is the hope that military encroachment and otherwise unmilitarized paths can be reversed. This is drastically underestimates the extent to which warfare and military strategy are intrinsic to political or social relations.
Starting with 4 minutes. So the order is going to be T, the miscalc advantage, the open internet advantage, and then the solvency flow, and then the criticism on bottom.
Did you upload it already?
There's not going to be any new cards.
Okay.
You can extend across our I means not T, I'm not going for it. We're faced today with two worlds, right? And I'm going to go through it in depth on why the negative is ultimately the better option and why the alternative is the solution that we need. First, to clear up a few things. The terms that I read that says hacking back causes escalation, that is to demonstrate that whether hacking back is done by the private sector or the military, there is no distinction. Both are escalatory, which means the plan cannot solve for miscalculation. Furthermore, securitization is a direct attempt to extend military control over things like the internet. When we have the federal government taking an advanced role, protecting the private sector to say that, oh, we need to do this because of security, this is the direct link that causes future attempts at securitization and perpetuates the cycle of the government taking over things like the internet, which means the plan ultimately triggers both of its own advantageous scenarios. So let's go through on the line by line. On the miscalc advantage, it becomes painfully clear that there's absolutely no brink to this advantage when you look at her Schmidl 18 card, where it says, Braverman told me that most cybersecurity companies dance at the limits of computer trespassing every single day of the week. They have been doing this for years. So all of these scenarios about, oh, we're going to, this is increased miscalculation, this is going to cause all of these scenarios, this is just either empirically false or there is no brink here whatsoever. The app is clearly an attempt to reinforce military control over the private sector, over the open internet, by saying that, oh, we need to stop these private companies from hacking back. They've already been doing it for a while, and there is clearly no brink here. Her own evidence admits this. Also, you can extend across the turn card that I read that says escalation, or rather hackbacks of any kind, are inherently escalatory. If you think that the military and cybercrime aren't any more hawkish than the private sector, you're simply wrong. In fact, the military is more likely to increase escalation than a private company. China can say, oh, this private company tried to hack back, this isn't a sign of war. China can look at the US government hacking them back and say, that's pretty close to an actual sign of war. It's really clear here when you stop and think about it for a second that military control only makes escalation worse. Quickly addressing her last part at the bottom that says that militarization is the new dangerous power structure. We'll talk about this more on the K, but when you really look at it, that increasing military control is simply no better. And at the point where, or increasing government control will actually be worse, and at the point where she can't solve either of her advantages, you're going to be preferring the alternative. On the open internet, arguments like free internet solves extinction is exactly the type of securitization argument that I'm talking about. So we'll talk about that on the criticism. But I think it's pretty clear when you look at the criticism how having an increased military control over the private sector is not the option that we're looking for to solve freedom of the internet. In fact, that's pretty counterintuitive. On the solvency flow, I think I covered a lot of those same arguments on the miscalc flow, but just going through enough, like you can concede that maybe we don't have the information sharing now. Like that's defense, I don't care about that. But on the solvency flow specifically, you looked at none of her cards actually say the federal government is less escalatory than the private sector. So again, you're going to be preferring that turn card. On to the criticism. There's really not an attempt by the app not to link in the security key, but I think you can extend across both of the link cards from Baugh and 9 that says specifically how we frame this issue either as a special kind of politics or as above politics in a direct attempt to increase military control of the private sector. This is a deliberate attempt at securitization and having the federal government increase its control over the private sector. On to the impacts. First, extend across the Dillon and Reed 2000 card that says this causes serial policy failure. Like, that concession alone means the AF never solves. You also extend across the Raymond and 16 evidence that says when we rush through these policies that we don't really think through because we think, oh, we have to do something, that urges unintended consequences and means the plan is yet again worse. Go to the perm. You can't perm and do both. The obvious 8 card is pretty clear on this that says to eschew the logic of security altogether, we have to reject every attempt at securitization discourse. So really here, the perm ultimately doesn't solve. My opponent says that I put myself in a double bind by saying that either the alternative isn't strong enough or that the case doesn't solve. If you look at the Hansen and Niesenbaum card under the alternative, it deliberately talks about how we need to bring in interdisciplinary discussions with the academic community specifically. So that addresses the first turn that says we lock civilians out of discussion, because the alternative clearly doesn't. The second card, the second turn that says miscalculation, that there's still the risk of miscalculation. Again, the private sector is already engaging in hackbacks. Having the military do it instead is not going to be any better. She says that we can't solve other nations and that all politics are grounded in violence. These are ultimately not reasons to reject the king. The alternative is the only way to solve these, the only way to prevent future securitizations and reverse this trend is to reject the logic of the affirmative. The logic is grounded in this logic that there are threats we need to solve and that establishing military control is the only way to do this. We have to reject this logic. You're voting for the alternative, not for the permutation.
Alright, starting my 216 of prep. Order is going to be solvency, the advantages, the K proper flow, and then the alt. Alright, is there anybody? Okay. On the case debate, this comes down to whether or not private security is worse than government security, and at the point where he provides you no analysis and no evidence as to why government is just as bad, my entire 1 and C is indicative of the fact that private security is worse. He says that the government is not less escalatory, but he can't provide you any analysis as to why, when I'm giving you cards, my E, F, and G card coming out of Advantage 2 go completely conceded in the 1 and C, talking about how the private sector can't attribute, which means they don't know who they're hacking back, which just leads to escalation, how that we need to control the number of attacks that are coming from these private sectors, and my G card that says that militarizing these private companies is a dangerous power structure that causes private securitization, which is worse. All of this analysis that goes completely conceded, which means it answers back all of his arguments. At the end of the day, I'm just way ahead on the debate about whether or not government is less escalatory or not. My whole entire 1AC is indicative and comparative to all of that. So that means that when you grant me my solvency that I'm solving back for private securitization, that turns the whole entire critique, which goes conceded. So you can extend across my advantages, and specifically my advantages too. He also concedes my C card that gives multiple scenarios for how this escalation would happen, because the private sectors don't know how to properly hack back onto the K flow. He concedes the term that says that the private sector is worse. He never gives you any analysis as to why the government is just as bad. I give you evidence coming out of the 1AC that private is worse. That's my E, F, and G card on the advantage 2, which means at the point where he cannot differentiate the security, and I'm already differentiating it for you out of the 1AC, you can go ahead and vote here. Onto the onto the double bind. The permutation is going to be better than the critique alone for 3 reasons. First, the critique cannot solve our case advantages. They can't solve back for private security, and this outweighs on the critique because it turns the critique, and it means that the critique can never solve back for securitization. And B, the critique can't solve the affirmative because there's securitization all over the place, which means if he can't overcome this one instance of securitization, he'll never actually be able to solve back. And C, if the permutation fails, they are subject to our double bind argument. Our plan is a relatively moderate example of securitization. If the alternative cannot function simultaneously with the plan, then it is doomed to be co-opted by all of the securitization that already exists, which means he'll never be able to solve back. Additionally, you can extend across my card that says he can't solve for other nations, which means he's not really changing any of the security structures, which only makes things worse. And he also never he concedes that hackbacks are currently happening now. The hacks are not the threat. The threat is the private companies securitizing into status quo and becoming military armies that securitize the United States. This analysis goes conceded. Also, he drops my turn that says, what? Oh, sorry.